Minari, available online now, new film directed by Lee Isaac Chung, partly based on his own childhood experiences as an immigrant Korean in rural America. The film has been getting strong positive buzz from the festival circuit, and I was very excited to finally see it. And I have to say, it is good, but not as good as I expected it to be. Although its shortcomings have to do with its very nature, which I will explain shortly. The movie follows a family of Korean immigrants in the US in the 1980s. Father, mother, son, and daughter, quickly joined by the children's grandma as well. At the beginning of the film, they moved from California to Arkansas. As we learned, back in California, they had fairly well paying jobs on chicken farms, but they did feel like a dead end. And especially the father was struggling with the feelings that this isn't the life that he wants to provide for his family. So the move to Arkansas has to do with the land that he bought and intends to transform into a farm, growing traditional Korean fruit and vegetables, intending to sell them to the ever increasing number of Korean immigrants. And so we watch the life of the family as it unfolds, mainly through the eyes of David, the little boy. The camera follows him most often, and even when not directly doing that, we usually observe the events from down low, from the eye level of a child. In this way, the movie kind of reminded me of Florida Project and also Wildlife, both of which had pretty intense adult themes and things happening in them, but watched through the eyes of children who often didn't fully understand the gravity of the situations and certainly had little impacts on it. In that way, in the way that the narrative is consistently putting us in the shoes of the boy, the movie is really very good. Some of the interactions with the rest of the family are very funny and endearing and reminded me of my own childhood adventures as well. Particularly, the boy's relationship with the grandma is quite entertaining. In general, it was quite remarkable to me how relatable the things shown on screen were, despite, a different continent, different time period, and perhaps most importantly, the unique experience of being an uprooted immigrant in a foreign country. And here's the interesting thing, it's about Koreans in the US. So, as a European, I would expect that they will be the strangers in this scenario, that they're the people with the different culture and customs. But somehow the movie manages to flip the perspective, and what ends up happening is we see the Korean family as the normal people, the quote unquote normal people, in the land of strangers, of weirdos, of odd customs. There's a character of an American farm helper who is slightly insane about religion, a Jesus freak, if you will. And I think he's one of the reasons why we naturally side with the family in this contrast. We identify with them because they're they're very relatable. They're the voice of reason, and all the stuff that's happening around them. That's the weirder stuff. Um, and I said in this contrast, I specifically didn't use the word conflict because it's not really conflict of cultures. The story of the movie does have obstacles for the family to overcome, problems and issues they face, but they're not really problems of racism or the Americans being mean to them. It's more like the well runs out of water, or there are thunderstorms which threaten the makeshift house they live in, and so on. It never feels like people against people, but more like people against the world, people against the environment, against nature almost. Now, here's my complaint about the film. Because of the lack of a traditional storyline, the movie is more of a snapshot of a life of a family, and as such, it does feel very, very slow at times. And I think overall, it's also a bit longer than it should be, which resulted in me getting almost slightly bored at times, at certain moments. And I'm usually a fairly patient moviegoer, so I can see other people checking out way earlier and not becoming invested in the story, which is a shame because the final 15 minutes do pay off all of that and are a huge emotional punch with the way they wrap things up. And I just wished we got there a bit sooner. Also, Stephen Yeun, who plays the father of the family, is excellent. I remember loving his performance in Burning a couple of years ago. Here he plays a totally different character, and yet somehow he's equally convincing. He's able to convey a whole wealth of emotions without saying a single word sometimes. Great stuff from him. So, to sum all of this up, Minari is a pretty good look at into the struggles of an immigrant uprooted family that puts a surprising amount of focus on things not directly related to the topic of immigration. A large part of the story could have basically worked almost the same regardless of the nationality of the family. And as this snapshot of a specific experience, I think it works quite well, and it has moments of humor and levity, but also heavier emotional stuff with no easy resolutions. But in my book, it is just a little bit too slow and too long to really be considered an excellent movie.